Julie Vargas is with the Director of Digital Solutions with Avery Dennison, Digital Solutions and Brand Protection. So Julie works with Avery's partners, retailers, and brands around the world on product digitalization solutions, which I think is quite different. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. We're missing a couple of people. I see Camila's here. Yay. And there's Grace. Great. So while they're coming up, first and foremost, yes, Julie Vargas, Avery Dennison, I'm honored to be here. I want to thank Janice and Deborah Alvanon and Coresight Research. This is a great day, great topics, and I'm really excited, but mostly honored to be sitting on the stage with these three incredibly wonderful women. So let me start by introducing by name, and then I'd love for them to actually show you via a video the incredible collaboration that they have. So we'll start with Grace June. So Grace June is the Executive Director of Open Style Lab, and we're going to learn more about that. And then we have Xian Horn as well, who's the founder and Executive Director of Give Beauty Wings. And then at the end is Camila Chiriboga, who is Creative Strategy and Inclusive Design at the Innovation Lab for Global Brands. Again, we could talk a bit and have them introduce themselves, but before we do, I want you to see for yourselves the incredible things that they've been doing. And we're having a technical difficulty, so we are going to help walk through what is in that video and help you visualize. So who would like to start, walk us through the collaboration of the three of you and how you know each other?
Well, maybe Grace should start since she's everything of Open Style Lab and kind of threads us all together.
Great, we'll start with Grace. Do you have a, here's mine. Okay.
Great. First, thank you for having me here. My name is Grace Jun. I'm an assistant professor at Parsons, so I could tell already from the crowd we have a lot of Parsons faculty and alumni and students, so Parsons proud. They've been a wonderful partner with our nonprofit organization called Open Style Lab. So Open Style Lab started at MIT in 2014 as a public service project, and we're now partnering with Parsons to look at inclusive education and different ways to do workshops and engaging people with disabilities and elderly. So through that collaboration, I had the privilege of meeting Camila and Xian. We met through faculty and friends of friends, and then we had a class and coffee.
I can clarify this of how we met. So I spoke at an accessibility meetup maybe a year and a half or 2 years before I met Grace, and just fell in love with everyone there. People from Google and just developers and big nerds with a lot of great ideas. And so I loved going back, and it's a monthly thing. And they had this fabulous Open Style Lab thing coming up. And I had presented a Google Hangout or something with Open Style Lab, and they had been creating these incredible raincoats for people in wheelchairs. And so when Grace got there and we got to the Q&A section, I said, hey, Grace, it was raining at the time. I said, I can't carry an umbrella. Can you make me a raincoat? And she's like, let's talk. So the rest is history.
Great, and then we're going to actually roll the video to see that coat in action.
Great.
Hi, I'm Xian. I'm a teacher, speaker, blogger, and human being. And I also happen to have cerebral palsy, but it's the blessing of my life so far. We wanted to create a custom-made garment for Xian. Through brainstorming activities, we decided to make a fall to winter coat. We created several prototypes that we tested with Xian, allowing us to evaluate our design and discover areas of improvement.
arm was stretched back when allowed Xian full range of motion.
Incredible. So Camila, tell us more. What was this
Yeah,
experience
so
like
if
for
you guys got me, I wasn't. And so I had been, after being in the hospital for some time, well, it might be the next video playing.
We have a soundtrack.
That was your hospital entry music.
Yeah.
There you go.
So after being in the hospital for some days and not being able to put on my own clothing, needing my dad to pull up my pants, it's when I realized that fashion had to be more inclusive for people with different mobility challenges, with different dexterity, and in terms of creating fashion that actually makes you feel good no matter your condition, no matter your abilities. And that's when I found Open Style Lab, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is a dream. And they came to Parsons that year, so I was part of the first team, and that's when I met Xian. And designing for special needs is completely different than what traditional fashion was. So as a designer, I feel like it's working with the user, and it was much more challenging. I remember I even had my dad at 5 a.m. helping me do the patterns because they're completely different than traditional patterns. But so that's where I come in to play.
Wonderful. Well, tell us more about Open Style Lab.
Yeah, I'll first begin with the class. I mean, Parsons has been really great to us in that we could have an interdisciplinary collaboration. So the class allowed students from sculpture, fine arts, design and technology, and of course fashion to collaborate. And so I brought in friends who have disabilities, because I think you can't have ideas in a bubble, right? But you can't also go out to corporate companies right away before a semester starts and ask for real life advice. But where is that middle? And I feel in education, we're kind of lacking a lot of those support systems. And in many ways, I think in Parsons, I've seen that happen. So the class has really brought in, I think, a way for us to collaborate. I've invited people who have OT to PT experience. Currently, we're running our 10-week summer program in partnership with Parsons, the Cerebral Palsy Research Foundation, to Ultimaker, which is a 3D printing company, as well as Woolmark and Polar Tech, to support us in kind, a lot of the resources that we think we could collaborate together. So Camila, in the class, we work with Parsons students, but this experience has been benched off of a model that's been repeated every summer. So we invite designers and engineers and therapists with one person with a disability to always make a garment, and we give it to them. And part of that research, we've documented stories. So these stories are what we tell corporate companies, like there really is a need out there. We're doing some R&D testing, and how do we talk to each other a bit more closely?
It's fantastic. No, thanks, Grace. It's really interesting to see it evolve. And tell us more, Xian, how did this play into what you're doing with Give Beauty Wings?
So when I started my program at NYU, I was really thinking about the inner work of beauty primarily, and it was a 6-week program, and at the end, I did have the girls, they're 14 to 21 years old, celebrate, their discovery process by dressing themselves. And so many of these girls said, I've never done this before, and came to class. Even one girl came in her swimsuit because she loves to swim. But to see what a sense of freedom came over them and a celebratory, to be able to reflect what's going on inside outwardly is so important. And really with fashion, I think of it as identity making. And it's something that we're used to within certain conditions. And so that was the first moment I realized I wanted to do something around fashion and disability, because clearly, I had a room full of light bulbs, who had never really felt that agency in this area. And so when this collaboration came about, it sort of, catalyzed all these other things. So I was able to also, after working with Open Style Lab, and I still consult with them, but even after that, doing the Design for Disability Challenge with the CP Foundation, which has worked with Derek Lamb, and with Anna Sui most recently. I promised Michael I would do some name dropping, so there it is.
Nice.
But no, and I think we're at this incredible time with Tommy Hilfiger, Target, all these major corporate brands are recognizing the need, and I think it is. I thank the culture also. We have created a culture that is hungry for this. And I think the next step really for me would be to see it just grow in terms of variety so that my girls, whether their favorite color is purple or whether they, you know what I mean, whatever it is, that they're able to express who they are more fully. And so it seems like a very natural thing in the advocacy that I do, that fashion has to be a huge part of it.
Fantastic, absolutely. Moving towards that inclusive part. And I think, and we talked a bit prior to today around how it's different, right? To go from inspirational design into functional design, and how do you handle that as a designer, and what advice would you give to the big brands that are looking to do this better and more often?
So I think you use color purple because it's your favorite color.
It is my favorite color.
But I think that's the difference. Instead of creating something for an imaginary persona, or sometimes you don't even have a persona in design school. It's whatever your mood board is, and then you're based on an inspiration. Whoever's using it, I don't know who's using it, but I just love these garments and I'll put them out there. But this is completely different because you're asking someone what's their favorite color. What do you do on your daily basis? What is your work setting like? And for example, with Xian, observing, how do you put your garment on? How do you take it off? What do you want? For example, we put 2 wings in the back of her coat because it's for her foundation.
Give Beauty Wings.
Of Give Beauty Wings. But it's actually creating garments with the person that's wearing it. And something important was also that usually in a fashion class, you're just with other fashion designers. But I learned the most from the occupational therapists, from the doctors, even with a hospital gown, like Chad was saying before, from the infection disease control. We learned so many things about fabric and materials. So it's that cross collaboration is essential.
Yeah, and Ginny mentioned also about moisture wicking, and that was a huge part of my coat experience because I'm putting a lot of work into walking. I'm half my father, so I do sweat, right? So having that, and then specifically when you mentioned, paying attention to how I put my coat on, something that I wasn't even aware of that I do is when I sit down, because I do tend to put my coat on sitting down, seated, and I would get the back of my coat caught on the chair, and I was so used to that, I didn't notice it, but these wonderful designers did. And so they created a higher coattail for me so that wouldn't happen anymore. So it's that attention to detail that I think everybody wishes that they could have a couture garment in their lives. And so for me to have this experience, it's a girl's dream, let me just tell you.
Fantastic. Well, good. And we also talked a little bit about footwear. You told me to ask you about footwear. So what are some of the other opportunities in this space that you see are still open for inclusive design?
Yeah, well, Nike has done the wonderful Fly Ease sneakers, but the truth is, as a speaker, I would love to wear sneakers to my speaking engagements, but I think it might look a little funny with this jumpsuit anyway. But so I had 5 years straight where I found this Mary Jane with a really durable sole that I would rotate. They had about 7 different colors. It was a Merrill brand. I'm giving them a little plug. They actually don't make them anymore, but they're on eBay, on Cycle. And so I was this chronic eBayer looking for Merrill Plaza Bandeau. That was my, because I knew, first of all, that the soles could handle, I'm pretty rough on my stuff, so could handle me. I drag my left foot. And so it means that most shoes I go through in about a month and a half, if I'm lucky. I remember during one of the snowstorms, I had a brand new pair of boots. 2 weeks later, when the NPR lady came and I showed her the boots, she couldn't believe that these are only 2 weeks old. So, you know, I think one opportunity that I haven't seen yet as much, other than Nike, is to have, you know, if you do footwear, please consider those that are a little rougher on their shoes. And, you know, there's certain things also that I can't wear, like flip-flops. Or I'm wearing heels now, but I can only wear them if they're chunky. So, you know, when you design your next stiletto, just know that not everybody can wear them, you know.
It's a great point. And it brings me to another interesting topic that I know we touched on a bit. I'll ask you, Grace, around the crossover from other industries. So we've talked a bit about the role of healthcare professionals, but what are some of the other industries or technology layers that are coming in to really drive functional design forward?
I'll say it in 4 segments. One, personally, I come from a design background, but I spent 5 years in UX design with engineers. So I'm pretty sure everyone in this room has a cell phone. And so the way I see how adaptability of cell phone is very similar to how we look at the future of clothing, if it includes technology. No matter how fancy machine learning AI gets, there's always that curve of getting to know who your customer is and if they're actually going to use it. One perfect example is if you remember BlackBerries, the keyboards, the QWERTY key that everyone used to flip open, that method that had translated into like the iPhone and the smartphones that we have today, it can't switch the letters or the numbers because people have memorized it, like muscle memory over the years of where to type. So when we tried to change it one time when I was working in the tech field, it was counterintuitive and it wasn't adaptable and it wasn't accessible. The same thing with clothes. If you're using performance fabric, we've been really lucky to have some of the donated fabrics that are left over either from performance manufacturers that give fabrics to either Nike or to Under Armour. So we've looked at durability, abrasion resistiveness, water repellency, as well as conductivity. And my field and looking into how to pastiche everything together has been mostly my job, to see what fabrics are really appropriate and how does someone, even Xian, find something that's durable that could work for even an athlete. This summer, we've been supported in kind by an award from the Knicks and Squarespace Award for $30,000, and they've mentioned about how proud they were to see and think about maybe athletes with disabilities can be included in this process when they saw some of our work. But we really have, I think, a great sense for technology when we look at corporate partners. So Li and Feng, they're doing some amazing things in digitalization. We have great mentors like Maura Hurton and kind of looking into clothing closures. So they're really leading for us, I think, the way we could talk about innovation and design. But most importantly, like this summer also, I'm teaching the students at Parsons how to do digital pattern making, because I really think that's an important skill to understand basics of fashion, but know that there are other ways to make things accessible, or to, it's like Photoshop, to have it more, I think, flexible for you to express what kind of designs and things you need. And so I'll turn that over to probably Camila on how she used technology and thought about it. But yeah.
Okay, so I think one of the most important things that I've seen a departure from I'm very new in the industry, sorry. But departure of how I was taught is that there's much more focus on the research and development of products. So instead of having, for example, I was just talking to a brand, they were like, okay, we need a solution in 3 weeks. I'm like, no way, this kind of design, it takes tons of user testing, it takes tons of technology resources, all have to contact professionals everywhere. It's not just talking to fashion designers. And so that's what I think, the focus is changing, and that's where technology comes into play. You need to use the latest technology to be able to make things faster, because it's a lot of collaboration between different kinds of people.
Yeah, it could definitely, digitalization tools can cut the time for production and cost. It also helps the designer convey their message in a way that they don't have to mock up a muslin for you every other week, so you're not wasting fabric. So there's definitely, I think, lots of ways that technology can be a tool, but if there's one takeaway, we use a very user-centric, holistic process, meaning it's people first. So all of our collaborations, I don't name the products or the jacket or the sock that we made. It's like Team Xian, and then everyone knows what came out from it, because it's really Xian's story. And so for the past years, we've had a collection of over 100 different design iterations, and we've been waiting, I think, to partner with the right group of people, and hopefully large and small companies alike could take it to expand and really grow.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah. And Xian, so back to you. So what's next in your mind? I mean, how all of this, the technology, the cross collaboration, where do you see this heading in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, I just see more variety popping up that, that I think it's wonderful where it's going, and the fact that it's been legitimized already, I feel. But I think now, just as with any form of fashion, to see, different designers, even, maybe the traditional runway designers designing for adaptive, or you know what I mean? I'd just like to see more of, I think we've created, with Mindy Shire's, wonderful collaboration with Tommy, she's started a revolution that now I think just has to grow and catch fire, and that's where you guys come in. Because, I think just like anything else, when you're creating for different types of people, we need the variety. We're not all going to be wearing stripes. We're not all going to love the color purple like me, even though I don't know why. But anyway, the point is that we need to start, I think, just expanding on this. Just because someone else has done it in their way doesn't mean you can't add something more to it. I'd like to see more technology, but more and more what I would like to see as, someone that runs these programs is to see my students being able to fully express who they are with these brands that are making clothes that fit them and fit their personalities and let them shine brighter. So that's the reason, and that would be the call to why we need more, is really that you can actually change a life and how somebody sees themselves. Because we were talking earlier, if my student goes into a job interview, but doesn't have the right apparel to feel like she's looking professional, that affects how well the interview goes. It does. So if you have something that, these are tools for empowerment, and it can be on a much bigger scale than it is right now. So I'm looking forward to seeing that happen. And if anyone wants to talk about how we can do more, please, we need to talk.
Very well said. That's the background to all of it, right? To be inclusive, inspire, and empower. So let me turn it over to you guys. Do you have any questions or comments for our phenomenal panel?
If there are no questions, while we wait, can I say one last thing?
Please.
Okay. So I think that just in the same way, this might be a little bit controversial, but just in the same way that sustainability efforts connect and help each other to expand, because we all have to save this world. It's gonna end some way, and we all have to help on sustainability, for example. We're all on the same planet. And I think that's the same thing with creating design for special needs and disabilities, because it's not that one designer created one way or a solution and then the other design creates a different way. We need everyone's solution, and we need to collaborate in this. Instead of being like, oh, I'm the person that designs for wheelchairs, or I'm the person that designs for the blind and visually impaired. It should actually be like everyone collaborating on these solutions, because we're helping people at the end of the day.
Well said. Going back to the earlier panel, hopefully 5 years from now, we're just calling it design and fashion, right? Great.
Is the video that you showed, available?
Is the video
Yes.
available?
It's on Vimeo. It's available.
And how can people find out more about the great things you guys are leading?
I
Online?
don't know. Yeah.
Currently, we're doing our 10-week program in partnership with Riverside Rehab. We're working with their long-term patients who I thought, might not have a need for style or universal design. But I remember just speaking for over 4 months, interviewing all the patients there. One lady was like, I need to dress up in certain colors and silhouettes because my husband comes to visit me every Sunday. So there's definitely a need for self-expression. And I think there's ways for, emerging creatives as well as those in therapy or design and engineering to better engage with that community. So our job is to really just make a nice fence and be like, okay, let's try to collaborate for 10 weeks. And at the end, show industries, show people, and invite people to tell them why this is such a need. Because many people don't know why still adaptive clothing is a need. Unless you've either faced through injury, know someone with a disability, or experiencing aging, which we're all living longer, but maybe not as well.
So I actually would love to add to that before would love to hear from the audience too, but from the previous panel, I was thinking about how can we mass market this very customized experience that I was able to have, and and I think maybe it's sort of like having this shirt in 5 different colors. Is it possible for someone to maybe scroll down, and if they drink through a tube and need a button, they can select a button. Or if they need certain kinds of closures, they can select those closures. And if we can, obviously bring the cost down, as we talked about, how can we bring that customization, just like you have, the petite option or whatever else, into the everyday experience, so that somebody who has a very specific thing, can get it. That, to me, is also another ideal. I know, I already answered the question, but I just had to add that.
Perfect. That's great. Yes.
Grace, if we look out 5 years, what would be your vision for Open Style Lab?
So 5 years out, vision for Style
For
Lab.
Open Style Lab. Wow. Well, first, I made a promise back when Obama was still in the White House, and I kind of lied to him, saying that yes, this program is duplicable to every university. But I just started with Parsons. I hope other teachers, other faculty will iterate, or at least the students that graduate will be able to take this throughout different schools, but also in their workplace. Many times, I think if you're having companies that are looking at adaptive apparel or inclusive design, you can't find the right intern that understands or has the sensitivity of going through that experience. And what I hope is that grows in 5 years. Secondly, I think embracing that customization and mass production is always going to be an issue. And it goes back to couture and ready-wear. It goes back to smartphones versus flip phones. And the majority of the world uses still flip phones. So that's one food for thought. But for us, I really hope that we could continue doing this research and really help corporate companies best prepare for, I think, something that they're going to take to go, and hopefully they take to go with a community that is less heard and is more heard today.
Yeah, and also I think one thing that's really important to consider is the economics of it. You mentioned sustainability, and we know how expensive it is to have a sustainable garment at this point in time. I'd love to see that go down so that my students who are on Social Security can have sustainable garments that are also adaptive. Or, this is a big thing to say, but, then there's also, friends of mine who are trust fund babies, and they can afford to customize for themselves at any cost. So, just something for everyone here to think about as you design is that, H&M was one of my go-to places, when I was younger because I was on a budget, right? And so and there's a lot to think about. Maybe this is another panel.
And it's a great place. We have a lot there. So I think it's right to find that intersection of functionality, inclusivity, and economics. So thank you so much, each and every one of you. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, guys.